Hello friends, welcome to The Buzz. My name is Susie Lytle, and today we're going to turn up the heat as we shadow one of our crews doing a prescribed burn at Braidwood Dunes and Savannah Nature Preserve. Then we're going to branch out to celebrate our native trees and then check in on some busy parents who call our preserves home. Get ready to see the forest in a bright new light on this episode of The Buzz. We're here at Braidwood Dunes and Savannah Nature Preserve to witness a natural force at work, fire. Nature has dealt with lots of different natural forces like flooding, blizzards, droughts, and even the flames. Now what's important to know is that fire is a natural occurrence and the habitats around here actually need it to survive. Before Europeans settled in North America, lightning strikes caused these fires. Now Native Americans caught on and used this technique as a tool to help hunting, improve visibility, and easier pathways to walk through the tall grass prairie. As we got more populated and cities began to rise, we saw more fires mistakenly set and causing those wildfires you see on the news, hence the Smokey Bear campaign. But today, our forest managers use fire as an effective and safe tool to give our habitats exactly what they need to stay healthy. Prescribed burns, or another name controlled burns, are fires that are purposely set to help this ecosystem thrive. We have different crews here on site that make all these plans for particular habitats that are adapted that need fire. So there are things called burn units, and they're the areas that are designated for fire, and they get rotated out every 2 to 3 years. These burns are carefully planned out. Some take 6 months worth of planning, and all the staff you see here today are expertly trained in different courses on fire ignition, suppression, the plans. Everything has to be really coordinated to make this work safely. Prescribed burns are determined the day of. These crews keep in mind of all the different temperatures and the conditions of the day. So they have to make sure the temperature's right, humidity, the moisture of the vegetation, and how the smoke is going to disperse. The goal is to keep the smoke going upward, not low. We don't want to see smoke crossing over the roads or through neighborhoods. Every crew member out here has a job to make this run smoothly and safely. You'll see that there's someone watching at the front of the line with the gator that has all the water. Then there's some people that are holding the drip torches that actually light the fire, followed with someone with a sprayer to control the fire lines. These fire lines are really important. That's what makes sure the fire stays where it needs to be. Fire lines can also be natural breaks out here in the habitat, such as creeks. You may also notice that these crews are in constant communication with each other. They're on their radios, making sure everyone knows what everyone else is doing and checking those conditions constantly. After talking with the crews, we learned that today's technique is called the ring technique. It's one of the safest, using 2 crews setting fires at opposite sides, creating a ring so it burns to ideally meet in the middle. In terms of prescribed burns, we talk about fuel sources a lot. And it's not necessarily like the fuel you put in your car, it's this kind of stuff. The leaves, the grasses, this organic matter. So this burns up really big, fast, big flames, and it's this kind of stuff the nutrients come from that get put back into the soil. Burn season usually runs from mid-October to about mid-April. The goal is to do this in the colder time of the year where the animals are underground and hibernating. Now these plants have special adaptations. You'll notice a lot of things are gone now after the burn has passed. These plants have roots underground that reach 12 feet deep, so they're perfectly safe and are ready to grow back stronger than before. One of the most asked questions when we do these burns are, what about the animals? Are they okay? Animals have been dealing with fire long before we were even here, and most of them know to fly away, run away, and these burns are done in sections that they're safe habitat to flee to. Now, other animals that are slow moving, like our turtles, are still hibernating underground. Mice, snakes, and lizards can burrow underground to protect themselves from the flames. We also keep in mind of nesting seasons and breeding seasons and avoid all that so we're not messing with their natural behaviors. The habitat here at Braidwood is a lot of savanna, and more particularly oak savannas. So these areas are adapted for fire. Oak savannas are made up of partly trees and partly grasslands, with the trees being mostly oaks. Here, this mighty oak is adapted for fire. It's got thick bark acting like a shield when the fires come through. Looking around, you can see that everything is pretty charred and burned, but this oak looks almost untouched. That's what we're talking about when these things are made for fire. It's totally prepared for it and can protect itself with its bark. These fires aren't like your bonfires. When you put a log in, it cooks it all the way through. These fires are hot and they move fast, so not everything gets cleared. Another benefit of doing these prescribed burns is to keep the invasive species at bay. So we have our native species, like these two oaks. Even though they're small, they handled the fire like champs. They don't even look like they were singed. However, our invasive species are from other areas of the world and not are as adapted as these native ones are. So one of the goals is to keep the native species healthy by burning out some of the invasive species. So the invasive species that fires usually target are the more woody ones. So that's honeysuckle, European buckthorn, and autumn olive. By removing a lot of this dense vegetation and invasive species, there's less competition for resources such as water. Now our streams and creeks can be fuller, benefiting the animals and the plants. In the big picture, when it comes to protecting our animals, by helping their habitat, keeping it healthy, in return helps them to have enough shelter and food to survive. I have certainly gained a new appreciation for all the hard work that our natural resources crews do for the forest preserve. Through the smoke, the flames, the heat, the ash, they were still focused and precise on the job that they had to get done. Now that the designated unit here at Braidwood Dunes has been burned, it won't be put back in the cycle for a few more years. In fact, burning season ends here in April, so the next time that our crews are going to get fired up will be in the fall. Prescribed burns are necessary to keep these habitats in check. It really provides more nutrients to the plants, and if the soil's happy, the plants are happy, making the animals happy. Plus, you're going to benefit from this too. These preserves are going to look gorgeous when they all grow back. We're back at Rock Run Rookery, where, if you remember, it was snowy in winter when we saw tons of bald eagles here. Well, it's nesting season, so we've been keeping track of a few nests around Will County. Now, it's important to note that because of the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act and the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, we keep these nest locations secret in order to protect these once endangered birds. It's recommended to keep a football field length away when viewing them at all times. In January and February, it's time to build a nest. Both male and female do this together as a bonding activity, and it could take about 1 to 3 months to build. Now they look for the tallest tree around water. Once they found the perfect tree, they'll head to the trunk and build a nest with the supportive branches underneath. And these nests can be huge. They can be 5 feet wide in diameter and 2 to 4 feet deep. And every year it's successful, they keep coming back and building it larger and larger. Bald eagles may not always know best. We have one nest that's not quite up to bald eagle building codes. Instead of building near the sturdy trunk of the tree, this pair decided to take the edge view. The next step is egg laying in February through March. Eagles have a clutch size of 1 to 3 eggs. Now, clutch is just how many eggs are in one batch. These eggs are about the size of the palm of my hand, so 3 inches tall, about 2 inches wide. It takes about 35 days for these eggs to hatch, and both male and female will take turns incubating. These bald eagles are a little awkward at first. They're little balls of fluff with big black beaks. Now the parents take turns feeding the babies, and they don't really pay attention to who gets fed equally. It's survival of the fittest, and it's not unusual to see one eaglet bigger than the rest because it's more aggressive at mealtime. Their meals consist about 85% of fish. These babies grow fast. By the time you see this footage, they're probably already double the size. It takes them about 3 months to become fledging, or what that means is that they go out on the nest, tip their toes out in the branches, or even start learning how to fly. They might be the same size as adults by this point, or a little bigger, because they have longer flight feathers acting like training wheels to help them learn how to fly. It takes about 5 years for them to grow that classic look of the white heads and a dark body. During their immature years, they'll leave their neighborhoods to see what this big world has to offer. But at age 5, they'll return to generally the same area they were raised to find a mate and start a family of their own. This is great news for us because every new little baby eagle brings more eagles to our booming population right in our own backyards. The first Arbor Day was April 10, 1872 in Nebraska, where prizes were handed out for the most properly planted tree on that day. It's estimated that 1 million trees were planted, and now the tradition continues throughout the United States and around the world. In our area, Arbor Day is celebrated on the last Friday of April, so let's get ready for the holiday by growing our native tree knowledge. There are 2 types of trees, deciduous and coniferous. The deciduous trees are those with the big leaves that fall to the ground every autumn. Coniferous trees are those with the pine cones and pine needles that are very hardy that can survive the cold environments. Now there's also tree communities or regions across the United States where certain trees grow best. In our neck of the woods, we are famous for our deciduous oak hickory forest. Our animals and plants have to adapt with the seasons. They have cues from the temperature and the light when everything changes from season to season. So for the fall, when our nights get longer and the temperatures get cooler, it cues the tree to start dormancy. Once in dormancy, the tree forms these protective buds with scales. The scales act like shields, protecting that new growth from all the freezing temperatures that are soon approaching. Then they wait. They wait all winter long until they get the right cues to wake up again. They're looking for longer days and warmer temperatures. Once that sweet spot hits, they burst open those buds and we'll start seeing blooming trees and leaves hit the skies again. Trees provide so many more benefits for wildlife and us. They absorb so many pollutants. So one mature tree can absorb 48 pounds of carbon dioxide a year. They also pump out oxygen, which helps us to breathe. One big leafy tree can provide a full day of oxygen for 4 people to breathe. Plus, it doesn't stop there. The trees also keep our water clean. When it rains, the tree roots absorb as much rainfall as possible. Then they slowly release it back to the rivers and streams, or they release it back into the atmosphere as water vapor when they release oxygen. Now, in an oak hickory forest, as you can imagine, the dominant tree species are, well, oaks and hickories. But mixed in, you'll also see black walnuts, sugar maples, and a few more will meet along the way. Now, something else to keep in mind is that trees come in different sizes and shapes. They all grow, they all send their branches up, growing taller, they grow wider by building new cells and thicker bark, and they grow deeper by sending their roots below our feet. But how fast they grow and how large is just up to the tree species. Oak trees are extremely important to the northern hemisphere. They provide tons of shelter and food for wildlife. And if you think of oak trees, you have to think about acorns. And I know the first animal that comes to mind is squirrels, but really any omnivore will take advantage of these nuts. Think of deer, raccoons, possums, wild turkeys, woodpeckers, blue jays, and so much more. Plus, humans have been using oak trees to make furniture, flooring, and even whiskey barrels. There are many different kinds of oaks. Here in our preserves, we have white oak, northern red oak, bur oak, and a few others. Basically, when you spot a large tree with outstretched branches, you found an oak. What's really cool is one of our famous oaks are located in Goodnow Grove Nature Preserve along Scout Trail, where it's a bur oak that one of our volunteers lovingly named the Old Oak. He did some measurements and believes that this oak is about 250 years old. It's a big, wide, stretching oak that has probably seen lots of things. Imagine the different people living on the land, floods, droughts, fires, and it still stands. Another place to find some really old trees is Messenger Woods Nature Preserve. This preserve is our oldest, dating back to 1930s, and the trees have been protected for over a century. These trees are so big that a red oak and a few other species are getting nominated to be on the Illinois Big Tree Register. These oaks could live and grow in lots of sunlight, being able to stretch out as far as they wanted with little competition. It is thought that these giants wouldn't grow as big in a dense forest. Don't move a muscle. We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we're going to learn more about trees. This is one of these trees that you may not be expecting to find in our forest. This one is called black cherry. And how to identify it is by looking at the bark. If you're scanning kind of the horizon, you'll see that there's different shades of brown. Well, this is one of the darkest shades of brown. Then look at the texture. It has these little plates that flip up, and we've always learned them as burnt potato chips. Can you see that pattern? They also have simple leaves that have little jagged edges and then tiny hairs on the back along the midrib. Now they do have cherries, but not the ones you're used to. These cherries are a pea size, black, and do have a pit inside. They'll ripen come August. The next tree we're going to talk about is a basswood, or also known as a lindenwood. These trees are lighter gray with flat plates on their bark that don't have a lot of deep ridges. Another factor is that supposedly when you knock on the bark, it makes a hollow sound. Another thing to make note of is how they grow. So this tree tends to grow in groups where it has multiple trunks or little saplings growing nearby. Another fun fact about basswood is the shape of their buds. Now you need a little bit of imagination, but they look like shark faces. There's a little scale underneath that forms a little mouth. Now right now they're starting to leaf. So these red buds are turning green and soon will break open to see these heart-shaped leaves. Shagbark hickories look like their name. They have shaggy bark, so their plates tend to curl up into pieces. And these pieces are great because they're little hiding spots for animals like bats and tree frogs. They have compound leaves made up of 5 to 7 leaflets. Now, like oak trees, they also make nuts in the fall. Their hickory nuts are encased in little husks, so a lot of times you might see the husk on the ground more than the nut itself. Let's get to know our state tree a little bit better, the white oak. This is an easier one to identify because it's going to be a big tree with the lightest color of bark around. So it's like a light gray, and then it also has this fungus that doesn't hurt the tree, but makes these white patches along the base of the trees. You'll also notice it holds onto its leaves during the winter. Their leaves have rounded lobes, so it's easier to identify versus our northern red oaks have pointy lobes. Another thing is, like all the other oak trees, they make acorns come fall. So in the fall, if it's a nice healthy tree and a good year, they can make 1,000 pounds of acorns. Cottonwoods are famous for their fluffy hairs that carry their seeds in May and June. I personally love these trees because their leaves can dance in the wind. They have a flattened petiole or a stem that catches really easily and it dances. You'll also notice that their bark is very blocky and have deeper furrows. Now, another thing to keep in mind that these cottonwood trees should be in wetter areas. In April, you'll notice that some of our flowering trees will have their turn in the sun. So this one here is a redbud, and these flower trees are so important for the tree itself to reproduce and make seeds, but also for our pollinators. When the bees first wake up, this will be one of their first meals. And then once the leaves come on this tree, it makes meals for caterpillars. And then once there's lots of caterpillars and beetles crawling around, then this is a great food source for birds. So then the tree becomes full of life. We talked about sugar maples a few episodes ago when we were tapping for maple syrup. But I still get a common question is, where are all the maple trees? You don't have too many. And that's true. In an oak hickory forest, they're not really the dominant species. You'll see a lot of the maples be more of the understory species. They are very tolerant to shade and can actually thrive with little sunlight. So in our case, you'll see more maples that are this size than the big giants. Maples have a simple leaf that have 5 points just like our hand. They also have seeds that have a wing and they fly down like a helicopter come summer and fall. Now that you've learned about our native forests and trees, are you ready to plant some? Native trees are built for our changing seasons and provide food and shelter for our local wildlife. Check out willcountynature.org to find our Nature Foundation of Will County's plant sales and plant webinars. And if trees are too big for your yard, no worries. There's also native shrubs and flowers that are perfect for all different kinds of conditions. Either way, I hope you plant something new for a greener tomorrow. From mighty oaks to the hot flames, we are a part of a pretty amazing ecosystem. The restoration work can be taxing, but once you see the healthy forest, the huge trees supporting our iconic bald eagles, it makes it all worth it. Now it's your turn. Map your next adventure at reconnectwithnature.org to find trail maps, book a campsite, and upcoming programs near you. I hope to see you out hugging a tree, but until then, I'll see you next time on The Buzz.